Order. Good morning all. I call Edward Morello to move the motion.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. It is an honour to I'd like to move that this House has considered the Independent Water Commission's final report. I'd like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting this debate, to my co-sponsors across the House, and to the Water Pollution APPG, of which I am an officer, for their support in securing this important debate. West Dorset is home to the world-famous Jurassic Coast, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, as well as 3 of Britain's unique chalk streams. Few issues matter more to me or to the people of West Dorset than the state of our water. This debate was originally intended to take place before the publication of the government's Water White Paper, so that Parliament could scrutinise the findings of the Independent Water Commission and then assess what steps the government intended to take in response. Instead, we find ourselves in a position where we are able to examine the Commission's final report and the White Paper together to see where they align, where they diverge, and most importantly, where they fall short of what the public expects and the scale of the crisis which a response demands.
Would my right honourable friend give way?
Oh, well, of course.
Thank you. I'd like to thank my friend for giving way. If you check the Surface Against Sewage app today in Torbay, as I did, you will see that there's 8 sites that are monitored where there could be overflows of sewage, and 6 have occurred so far this year at 6 of these sites. 2 are ongoing. We've also suffered cryptosporidium outbreak in the last 18 months. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that we need to stop tinkering with the system and have systemic reform to tackle these challenges?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and I will try and outline in the course of this speech some of those recommendations, but I think it's probably a good opportunity to also thank Surfers Against Sewage for all of their hard work, and like him, I use the app regularly before deciding whether or not to swim at my favourite beaches. It is an understatement to say the public's confidence in the water sector has been damaged. It has been eroded by years of sewage pollution, repeated flooding, poor decision-making, too little regulation, scattered legislation, and a business model that has too often rewarded failure. This debate is more important than ever in light of the recent flooding, not just in West Dorset, but across the southwest and the country as a whole. Following Storm Chandra, communities saw again the devastating consequence of a system that has reached breaking point, that can only react after failure rather than preventing it in the first place. Emergency services, who I must pay tribute to, have done an outstanding job, but residents were left dealing with sewage in their homes, damaged property, and uncertainty about when it will happen again. In West Dorset alone, 84 homes in Westminster experienced raw sewage flooding their properties. In Maiden Newton, one family was flooded repeatedly since 2024, including again just days after finally returning home following 15 months of repairs following the last flood. As the climate continues to change and extreme weather events become more common, this will only become a more common occurrence. Our infrastructure must become more resilient to deal with today's problems and tomorrow's. Of course.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. He will know that I am the chair of the APPG for floods and drought and for water. So in terms of the white paper, 25-year strategic planning, absolutely brilliant. Regional knowledge and tactical interventions, absolutely brilliant. Engineering capability at the heart of that strategic decision-making, a regulator that brings the economy and the environment together as one for the first time, I think is really important. But would you agree with me that this is an opportunity to make sure that we don't miss out maintenance of existing assets and also those new ones that we're going to be putting in the ground with the extreme amount of investment that's going in over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And would you also agree with me that therefore we need some sort of resilient standards that provide that knowledge for those people that are applying that investment in the future?
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. As the Liberal Democrats always try to be, we are constructive opposition, and so I will absolutely identify where the white paper makes steps in the right direction, and hopefully he'll agree with some of our recommendations for where it can be improved. The Independent Water Commission's final report was a major and long-awaited milestone. It reflected unprecedented public engagement with more than 30,000 submissions from the public who are angry, frustrated and rightly demanding change. The report contains important proposals, embedding public health into law, improving regional planning, strengthening monitoring and replacing Ofwat with a new integrated regulator. These are steps in the right direction, and I want to put on the record my thanks to the Commissioners and to the countless campaigners and volunteers like the River Lim Action Group, Surfers Against Sewage and River Action who have fought for cleaner rivers and seas for years. This report exists because of their continued pressure.
Will the honourable member give way?
I'm grateful. He mentions the River Lim Action Group, and they work on the boundary between his West Dorset constituency and mine. At Upline, the River Lim Action Group has identified that the sewage treatment works there is not able to cope with the amount of sewage that occurs during high rainfall. Does he agree that South West Water needs to put in more storage for sewage during periods of heavy rain?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. He works tirelessly on issues on the River Lim, and I absolutely agree there are essential works throughout the system that need to be made if we are to reduce sewage release, but we need to do that in a way that does not pass the cost on to residents and consumers as well. I'll give way.
Thank the honourable member for giving way and congratulate him on securing the debate. When he was itemising those who are doing such an excellent job, such as Surfers Against Sewage, etc., and those others, that along with those is another individual who's been a champion for many years, Fergal Sharkey, from my city of Londonderry, who has campaigned and championed these issues, and that all of these people are doing a magnificent job, but we need to see a strategic response from government in order to deliver what we all want to see.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. He's absolutely right to highlight the work of Fergal Sharkey and the many campaigners around the UK who take it upon themselves they give up their free time to raise awareness of the issues in their local area as well. The central question for this House is whether the Commission's recommendations and the White Paper that follows go far enough to meet the scale of the challenge we face. I will give way.
First of all, can I commend the honourable gentleman for his perseverance and dedication to this subject matter, and also kind of pay tribute to his party members who always turn up and do their bit. I think the Independent Water Refining Report refers to, and I quote, a fundamental reset to address failing regulations that have negatively affected customers and the environment. But does the honourable member not agree that government, and in this case the Minister, must be prepared to take the helm in ensuring that this reset actually takes place and it's just not simply a change in name?
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. He's absolutely right. I shall come on to some of the recommendations that we believe are necessary in order to make this more than just a reset in name only. Let me start with the reality in my constituency. In 2024, West Dorset recorded 4,200 sewage spills and discharging of raw sewage for nearly 49,000 hours from 90 storm overflows. I have no doubt that other members in this House can cite similar, if not worse, statistics for their constituency. Only 11% of our monitored river sites reach good ecological status. The River Lim is categorised as ecologically dead. Rare chalk streams such as the River Froome, Wraxall Brook and West Compton Stream are under severe pressure, as is Atlantic salmon populations. Tourism in West Dorset, worth over 322 million a year and supporting more than 5,000 jobs, is threatened by our poor water quality. My constituents, their children, the visitors who support our communities and families, including my own, love our beautiful world-famous waterways, but no one should have to check an app on their phone to see whether or not it is safe to swim that day. The final report continually underlines the lack of public trust. To change this, reforms must be visible, transparent and public-facing. If people are to believe that things are changing, they need to be able to see progress, understand the standards and know that failure has consequences. That is why I believe we need blue flag-style standards for rivers and chalk streams. Clear standards, mandatory testing and visible ratings would help rebuild trust. Where standards are met, confidence grows, and where they are not, communities can hold companies and regulators to account. Recommendation 3 of the report proposes a comprehensive systems planning framework with regional water authorities responsible for integrated planning, funding, setting objectives, monitoring and convening stakeholders. That approach recognises that water does not respect administrative boundaries and neither should planning. Housing growth, agriculture, flood risk, river health and water supply must be considered together across government departments. These bodies must be statutory, democratically accountable and empowered to make binding decisions. Without that authority, we would risk repeating the mistakes of the past, endless consultation without delivery. When I have previously argued that water companies should be made statutory consultees in the planning system, the government has resisted that change. The Water White Paper now states that ministers will also consider the role of water and sewage companies in relation to the planning applications as part of reforms to statutory consultees. That is a welcome change, but simply considering it is no longer enough. Making water companies and national landscapes statutory consultees for major developments would be a preventative, low-cost reform that aligns planning decisions with environmental reality and reducing flood risk. The Commission is also right to highlight the importance of pre-pipe solutions. Recommendation 10 calls for legislative changes to expand pre-pipe solutions so that we can stop pollutants and rainwater from entering the system in the first place. In too many places, combined sewerage are overwhelmed by rainfall, mixing with raw sewage and triggering spills. This is not sustainable in a changing climate. We need a long-term national rainwater management strategy with sustainable drainage systems mandatory in all new developments and a serious programme of retrofitting in existing communities. Rainwater harvesting should become the norm. We must bring ourselves in line with modern housing standards and our European neighbours, just as minimum solar requirements have been made mandatory thanks to my honourable friend from Cheltenham's private members' bill. These solutions are low carbon, cost effective and resilient. They reduce pressure on sewers, lower flood risk, protect rivers. Yet the White Paper only gestures vaguely in this direction. Without clear, consistent standards and funding, progress will remain slow. On regulation, the Commission calls to replace Ofwat with a new integrated regulator. It is welcome and overdue. The Liberal Democrats have been calling for exactly this since 2022. Ofwat's primary duty to ensure reasonable returns has shaped a culture that has tolerated pollution, debt loading and underinvestment. A regulator with explicit duties to protect public health and environment is a step forward. I am glad the White Paper has stated that the government will commit to a new regulator by abolishing Ofwat and bringing together the relevant water system functions from existing regulators, Ofwat, the DWI, EA and Natural England into one new body. But again, this alone is not enough. It must have teeth. It must be properly resourced, independent and willing to enforce the law. I will give way.
Gentleman for giving way. The Public Accounts Committee was recently doing a hearing on environmental regulation with the Environment Agency and Natural England. Does he share my concern that this transition to a new regulator is a huge undertaking and that there is a risk whilst the new regulator is being set up that they mustn't take the eye off enforcement and regulation of the current water companies and ensuring that their pollution is reduced in the meantime?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention, and I 100% share her concerns that water companies will exploit this moment in time, and actually this is the moment when the public are calling out for firmer action. So the speed of that transition is vital. Existing legislation already requires sewage to be treated effectively and allow storm overflows only in exceptional circumstances. Yet the government has admitted that overflows are being used far beyond their original purpose. Investigations have shown illegal discharge even on dry days. The Office for Environmental Protection has concluded that regulators have failed to comply with existing environmental law. The first task of the new regulator must be to enforce what is already on the statute book and to review permits across the system. The Commission also highlights the need for stronger customer protection. Recommendation 41 proposes strengthening the CMEX incentive and moving to a supervisory approach. That reflects the reality that customer experience has not improved despite financial incentives. People paying their bills expect reliable service, timely responses, and basic competence, not call centres that go unanswered and complaints that disappear into the void. This brings me to the question of accountability and ownership. The White Paper recognises the unsustainable debt levels created by the current model and talks about attracting long-term, low-risk investors. It also introduces new performance improvement regimes. But there is a real risk here of tinkering around the edges while leaving a fundamentally broken model intact. As long as water companies exist primarily to generate profit, decisions will be shaped by that motive alone. Alternative models across Europe deliver lower bills, higher investment relative to debt, and fewer discharge. Both the Commission and the White Paper fail to engage seriously with these models. In West Dorset, we are served by Wessex Water and in a small part by South West Water. My constituents see a pattern of rewarding failure across the water system that is impossible to justify during a cost of living crisis. Between 2020 and 2021, water company executives paid themselves £51 million in remuneration. I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Last year, bosses of Wessex Water received £50,000 in extra pay from a parent company, more than many in Yeovil earn in a year. While constituents in Ilminster report they cannot swim in their rivers without risking getting sick, does my honourable friend agree the government must now ensure sewage dumping at bathing sites end by 2030 and water bosses get no extra pay until sewage spills stop?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. He's absolutely right to highlight the issues in his constituency and absolutely at a time when people are paying higher and higher water bills, there is understandably a sense of frustration with the outlandish bonuses that are being paid to executive bosses who are overseeing this failure. Between 2020 and 2021, water company executives paid themselves £51 million in remuneration, including £30.6 million in bonuses. I'm glad that the government started to take action on this behaviour in the Water Special Measures Bill, but it's not enough. In 2022 alone, water and sewage companies paid out £1.4 billion in dividends, nearly 3 times the year before, while household bills rose and families were forced to make difficult decisions, and all the time while sewage continued to be pumped into our rivers and beaches. We need a proactive, evidence-based assessment of alternative ownership models before the water reform bill is finalised. Water companies should be redesigned with public benefit and environmental protection as their core purpose. We, the Liberal Democrats, are calling for a new ownership model, with water companies mutually owned by customers and professionally managed. The special administrative regime exists to protect customers and the environment when companies fail. Thames Water is the clearest example of a company that has failed financially, operationally and environmentally. We need a transparent criteria for when SAR will be triggered and a clear plan for using it to transition companies into public benefit models where necessary. Affordability must also be central to reform. It was not mentioned enough in the final Commission report. Families are already under intense pressure from the cost of living crisis. Environmental improvements cannot be paid for on the backs of those least able to afford it. It must be paid for by those who caused it. Bills must be fair, and investment must be efficient, long-term and low risk. Financial penalties must be ring-fenced for infrastructure upgrades and nature-based solutions, not absorbed as a cost of doing business. The Commission calls for an end to operator self-monitoring, and that is welcome, as is the move towards open monitoring and a near real-time data. The speeding ticket-style fines previously introduced by this government should also be welcomed. But credibility depends on independent testing, frequent inspections, and proper funding for regulators. Data must be accessible, understandable, and trusted by the public. Finally, we cannot clean up our rivers by focusing on sewage alone. Agriculture accounts for pollution in around 40% of water bodies. Farmers are essential partners who are struggling in our current system of underfunding. The system must support prevention at source by supporting our farmers and helping them to tackle water pollution through better funding and guidance. In closing, Chair, this is a huge opportunity for cross-party consensus, for legislative reform, for long-term thinking and change. The amount of support that this issue has got from across the House is a testament to the scale of the problem, but also people's willingness to collaborate on the future. The Independent Water Commission has laid important foundation. The White Paper moves the conversation forward, but neither go far enough on their own. Change must be public-facing, rooted in public benefit, and focused on prevention rather than clean-up. It must restore trust. Trust that politics can deliver change. Trust that regulators will enforce the law. Trust that legislation can be passed in this House that will make a difference and can change a sector. And trust that water companies will finally put people and the environment before profit. Communities like mine in West Dorset cannot afford another decade of half measures. Our rivers, our coastlines, our communities, our health, our homes are at risk. I hope we can seize this moment to deliver transformational reform that the public rightly wants. Thank you.
I am grateful to the honourable gentleman. Can I remind all members, if they wish to speak, they need to continue to bob throughout the debate so that we know you still do. And if everyone sticks to around about 5 minutes, we should be able to get everybody in comfortably. The question, therefore, is that this House has considered the Independent Water Commission final report. Anna Dixon.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship this morning, and I'd like to congratulate the member for West Dorset on securing this important debate. My constituents in Shipley, with the lovely River Wharfe and River Aire flowing through, have been outraged at the levels of water pollution going into our rivers. They face very high bills, and there continues to be leaking infrastructure causing damage to our roads and indeed to some homes. Companies like Yorkshire Water have now been failing us for years. We suffered last year from a failure to invest in new reservoirs with an almost year-long drought starting in the spring. So I very much welcome that this Labour government have come in with a determination to tackle these issues. And I was very pleased to vote and support for the Water Special Measures Bill, which made sure we took immediate action to clamp down, for example, on those obscene bosses' bonuses, including those that the Chief Exec of Yorkshire Water was receiving. Very sadly, the Kelder Holdings company that owns Yorkshire Water also paid her a sort of behind-the-scenes £1.3 million extra payment, which I, along with others, have been urging her to donate and give back. And I hope that the spirit of the legislation is met in future by the companies. I too welcome the work of Sir John Cunliffe in bringing forward his Independent Water Commission, and I submitted to that review setting out some of the things that I felt were necessary in reforming the water industry so that it works better in the interests of customers and the public, that it does clamp down on the illegal discharges of sewage, as we've been hearing, which are all too frequent, and that there is a fundamental reform. So I'm pleased to see that the government, in bringing forward the Water White Paper, has addressed quite a number of the issues that are within the Water White Paper. I'd also like to just put on record my thanks to the People's Water Commission, which was a group of campaigners, researchers and experts who came together to do their own work, engaging the public to see how they felt about water, and in particular Becky Mulby, who is a local resident and involved in the Ilkley Clean River Group. Mr Chair, I also sit on the Public Accounts Committee. I don't know whether that's part of my record of register of interest, but we have recently undertaken 2 reports, the first of which was on water regulation, the second, which we haven't yet published, our report was on environmental regulation. And I do just want to briefly quote our finding in that report, which was that Ofwat has failed to prevent companies taking excessive dividends, increasing levels of debt and setting up complex company structures, all of which have reduced their financial resilience. The sector's risk profile has risen and customers must now pay investors higher returns as a result. And to illustrate that, on my own Yorkshire Water bill, 23% is just to finance the debt. 17% is spent on infrastructure investment. How can this be? And there is unfortunately no end in sight for bill payers being made to pay this debt. And I would like to urge the Minister in her response to talk about how she's going to change the gearing of these companies, which are so indebted, and where, despite figures such as 104 billion investment and for Yorkshire Water 8.3 billion, it doesn't seem that the shareholders are actually putting their hands in their pockets to be putting, and it's the customers who are going to have to pay for this infrastructure upgrade and the failure of these companies to invest in the past. I would also, Mr Chair, just like to draw attention to a couple of other things where I would like the Minister potentially to give some reassurance. In creating the new regulator, which I very warmly welcome, and it was a recommendation of the Public Accounts Committee, as mentioned, how we ensure that it has the right skills and the resources. We know that the previous government cut money to the Environment Agency, which meant it failed to do its job in prosecuting some of these incidents. And I'm pleased that this government, we now have many cases in hand. But just making sure they've got the skills both to take action on the finances, given these complex structures, how do we really ensure that our money as customers is going on the things that we want, and also how they take action on the pollution, and how will they work on an ongoing basis with the Environment Agency to join up on things like how the farmers, who face many, many regulations, can do their part in cleaning up our rivers and seas. So with that, Mr Chair, I'll conclude and just urge the Minister to take all actions in the Water White Paper to make sure that companies like Yorkshire Water are properly held to account in future. Thank you.
Dr Ellie Chance.
Pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I thank the honourable member for West Dorset for securing this debate. He shares my passion for tackling water pollution, which is why we work together in the all-party parliamentary group on water pollution, which I set up when I joined this place to represent the interests of my constituents and citizens across the country who are passionate about this, recognising that unfortunately the APPG for Water has a secretariat run by the water industry, and so it was vital to get citizens' voices into Parliament on this. Now, I'm going to confine my comments to tackling two specific... I will give way.
So I'm the chair of the APPG for Water. It's managed in-house. It was all brought in-house. So there's absolutely no external body, which is why we did it, because we wanted it to be totally independent.
I thank the honourable member for that clarification, and I'm delighted to hear that under this Parliament that has been changed. Historically, it was run by the water industry, which is why it was necessary to set up a new group. I'll confine my comments today to talking about two specific issues, two elephants in the room, essentially, ownership and agriculture. They are effectively missing from the Independent Water Commission. They're effectively missing from the Water White Paper. And frankly, it's extraordinary that that is the case. Why did the government prevent the Cunliffe Commission from looking at these two crucial issues? Because without addressing them, we cannot tackle the problems in the water sector. Privatisation of water has comprehensively failed. Privatised water companies have paid £85 billion in dividends to shareholders since privatisation. They have racked up debts of £65 billion, all the while leaks proliferating, infrastructure crumbling, reservoirs failing to be built, customers paying hand over fist for poorer and poorer service. It's completely unacceptable. Nearly every river in England is polluted. England's bathing water quality is the 5th worst in Europe. England's surface water quality is the 7th worst in Europe. Over 1 trillion litres of water was leaked in 2024. I've already mentioned the shareholders' 85 billion and the 65 billion of debt. Privatisation will cost customers a further £22 billion over the next 5 years, because that is the profit cap, the return on capital that's been set by Ofwat. Around a third of customer bills now service corporate debt, and Ofwat allowed bills to go up by 26% on average just this financial year. That's an average of £123 per household. This is a failing water system. No other country in the democratic world has privatised its water system to such a degree as we have in this country. And it is clear a market-based approach to the water sector simply does not work. Water is a natural monopoly. Customers have absolutely zero choice. Water is a public good, and it should be in public hands so that it works for public benefit. Why did the government prevent the Water Commission from even looking at this question? The government... I will give way.
I thank my friend for giving way, because the Rybrook in Ashtead, which runs past local schools, has suffered loads of raw sewage leaks. It feeds into the River Mole, which has seen 3,000 hours of storm overflows in January 2026. And the runoff pollutes local chalk streams as well. And Mumberman might be interested to know that whilst the report also ignored reforming water companies, it only mentioned chalk streams twice. So does my honourable friend agree with me, as she mentioned that privatisation isn't working, that really now we need to bring water companies into mutually owned public benefit companies and end the sewage scandal for good?
We need to bring water companies into public ownership, because only by running water for public good will we tackle the scandal that has been caused by privatisation in recent decades. 82% of the British public want water to be in public ownership. That's more than the percentage that want the railways to be in public ownership. So why is the government so opposed to this? They're very fond of quoting completely imaginary figures about the supposed costs of doing this. But let's take Thames Water as an example. It's a company that has apparently a market value of £4 billion, judging by the last market offer that we had for it. It faces a repair bill of £23 billion. So in effect, its value is nil. We could take it into public ownership at zero cost and run water for public benefit. Now, the second lacuna in the Independent Water Commission's work and in the Water White Paper is agriculture. Why did the government prevent the Water Commission from looking at agricultural pollution? We know that diffuse agricultural pollution is half of the problem. We cannot ignore it. It is another elephant in the room. We have to focus on addressing it together with farmers who are crying out for support to do this. Now, to give the Independent Water Commission some credit, they did actually look at this issue. They mentioned it in their conclusions, page 20. They said, agriculture has the most significant environmental impact on water bodies in England and Wales. In fact, in the very next sentence, they cited the example of the River Wye in my constituency of North Herefordshire, where the problems of diffuse agricultural pollution have led to huge economic, social and environmental problems. They said a few pages later that the government's water strategy should be cross-sectoral, setting out in one place the requirements on all the sectors impacting on or interacting with the water environment, including agriculture. And yet, when the government published its Water White Paper, only one of the 50 pages talked about agriculture. This is not a comprehensive, joined-up strategy. As the Independent Water Commission itself pointed out, achieving a future environmental target for water will depend more and more upon reducing the contribution of agricultural pollution. We must work with our farmers, the stewards of our land, to tackle this problem. It is more than half of the issue. The government can no longer ignore that half of the issue. I beg the Minister, please give this the same attention that we have to give rightly to the water and sewage companies. Without that comprehensive approach, we will simply fail to clean up our rivers, lakes and seas. Thank you.
If people cannot stick to 5 minutes or less, then those at the end of the list are going to get a lot less. Josh Newbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to speak in this debate with you and the Chair. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for West Dorset for securing this important and timely debate on the Independent Water Commission's final report and then on the Government's White Paper, which will move forward with many of its recommendations. I'd like to place on record my thanks and respect to the Minister for setting up the Commission and to Sir John Cunliffe and his team for his forensic assessment of our water industry, which many recognises the fundamentally flawed, if not completely broken state of our water industry. Since being elected, I've heard from constituents about flooding, sewage discharges and water infrastructure failures. I've heard from families worried about river pollution, from businesses concerned about the resilience of supply, and from residents frustrated that problems they see locally feel so slow to be addressed. For too long, the sector has been characterised by fragmented planning, overlapping regulation and ageing infrastructure. So the proposal to establish a single integrated regulator alongside a clearer long-term strategic vision for the sector represents an important step forward to restoring public trust and delivering the resilient water system that our country desperately needs. As a member of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee, I'm particularly conscious that reform has to be judged not only by its intent, but by its delivery. As Sir John did, the White Paper is right to identify the historic lack of joined-up long-term planning as a central weakness. Around 60% of water mains were built before 1981, with a significant proportion now more than a century old. And I've seen the effects of that in my own village of Norton Keynes and in Rugeley, where water companies have even struggled to work out who owns broken pipes. Public confidence in the sector continues to be shaped by the visible impact of pollution and sewage discharge. My constituency is served by both Severn Trent and South Staffs Water, and performance across the sector demonstrates both areas of progress and ongoing public concern. For example, while Severn Trent has achieved long-term strong performance ratings in some operational areas, data also shows there were more than 450,000 hours of discharge in their area alone in 2024. That contrast illustrates why stronger transparency, oversight and accountability remain essential if reforms are to rebuild public confidence. I therefore welcome proposals to move towards open monitoring, ensuring that companies are no longer effectively marking their own homework. Agricultural runoff, as has been mentioned, contributes significantly to water pollution in some catchments, and that has to form part of any long-term strategy if we're serious about improving river health and water quality. But it needs to be tackled, I believe, in partnership with farmers, rather than characterising them as willful polluters of the waterways that they themselves rely on. The move towards integrated regional water planning could be a significant step forward in that kind of area. In constituencies like mine, effective coordination between flood prevention, agricultural practice, environmental regulation, planning and economic growth as well is essential. Regional planning could deliver more preventative and nature-based solutions, but it will require clarity about governance, accountability and its relationship with water company investment decisions. And on accountability, as a member of the Cooperative Party, I was glad to see the government made powerful customer panels a key plank of last year's reforms. For too long, customers have felt completely disempowered. With the incredible work of citizen scientists and action taken by the government, that is starting to change. I note that the Commission's final report was lukewarm about the mutual model for water companies because of a perceived risk to customers. But I hope the Minister will continue to look at ways we could incorporate cooperative principles into reforms to the sector, up to mutual ownership, and including that if it would resolve some of the issues that we see. Before I conclude, Sir Jeremy, I couldn't speak on this topic without referring to executive bonuses, given the galling payments we've seen for senior figures in failing water companies, despite the action the government took in the Water Special Measures Act. It's shameful that we have got to a point with the water industry where, rather than trust that they will follow the spirit of the law, the government is having to take further action because bosses who would not earn performance-related bonuses would rather spend their time with their legal teams cooking up creative ways of relabelling bonuses, or with their accountants rerouting bonuses, than spend their time cleaning up the filth that our constituents are paying through the nose for. If they will flout the spirit of the law, then the letter of the law will have to change, and I'm glad that we have a government that is decisive about the need to do that. Yeah. The Independent Water Commission has provided a clear diagnosis of the challenges facing our water system. The government's white paper sets out an ambitious pathway for reform in many areas, and I welcome its focus on long-term planning, stronger regulation and improved environmental outcomes. The task ahead, though, clearly is to ensure that these reforms translate into real-world improvements that our constituents can see and feel. Safer waterways. Yes.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I think what's really important, I want to put it on record as well. There are lots of people who work for those water companies. There are lots of farmers out there who are feeling that reputational hit for what's going on and that accountability that needs to be held at that decision-making level. I just wondered if you agree with me that we need to recognise those people that are out day in, day out on the front line in the offices, making sure that pollutions don't occur, that leaks are fixed. And it's not their fault at all. They are working really hard, leaving their families late at night to try to make things better.
Absolutely, Sir Jeremy, I couldn't agree more with my honourable friend. On the committee, we've heard often from bosses of water companies that some of the criticisms of their companies are impacting morale on the front line. But we also point out that if there are any bonuses available to people on the front line, they certainly aren't of the order that they're receiving. And so I absolutely agree that we need to respect them and make sure that their voices are heard as we reform the sector as well. So as I said, safer waterways, more reliable infrastructure and a water system that is fit for the future, that is what we need to see. And I very much thank you for the opportunity to speak in today's debate.
Rachel Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for West Dorset, for bringing forward the debate this morning. I'd also like to thank my many constituents who quite rightly have grave concerns about this matter and have written to me about it. My party has made its dissatisfaction with the white paper clear, and my colleagues are again today making that case strongly. We've been leading the charge in calling for a comprehensive approach to tackling what is nothing short of a crisis in the water sector. I note that this government made tackling this crisis an important pillar of its election campaign. So it is with deep disappointment that the reforms set out in the water white paper fall far short of what the situation demands. The system is in dire straits and requires a complete overhaul, but instead the government offers only the lightest of plans, failing to beef up regulations in a meaningful manner, as well as providing no funding provision for enforcement. While the abolition of Ofwat is welcome, the uncertainty around its replacement is unhelpful. Farmers, too, need proper support to tackle agricultural runoff, which accounts for around 40% of water pollution. As stewards of the land, they are inevitably stewards of our water as well. How can it be that we have allowed corporate greed to run rampant and for these companies to have presided over the routine pumping of filth into the waterways of this land? It is quite remarkable. All the while, the good people of the West Country have seen their bills soar, some by as much as threefold. The government offers only the lightest of plans, weak regulation, no meaningful enforcement, and no funding to ensure compliance. As my constituency straddles the Somerset-Devon border, we are in the unenviable position of having two water companies, Wessex Water and South West Water. I have made my views on South West Water clear before. I think it is fair to say I'm afraid I will once again direct my ire at them because their behaviour, their inertia, their refusal to acknowledge the gravity of situations of their own making has been pitiful. Just a week ago, I raised the matter of my poor constituents at Borden's Bakery in Bampton, who have been forced to close and sell up because their property has flooded so many times. I had a most unhelpful meeting with the director of South West Water, who was only showing his complete complacence and, I have to say, arrogance at that meeting, to such an extent that I had to ask him and his staff to leave. The public health implications are grave. I have heard horror stories from constituents whose children have fallen seriously ill after swimming in local rivers. And Dunster and Blue Anchor beaches now carry the dreaded brown flag status. It is a shameful, shameful state of affairs. Is it really too much for the British public to expect clean water as a basic right? And at risk of being blunt and somewhat crude, suffice it to say that the Tiverton sewage works absolutely reeks every single time it rains. Anyone familiar with the West Country will know how often that is. It is inexcusable and utterly foul. It is a stench and a situation more in character with the 12th century, but certainly not the 21st. I could be more colourful with my description, but I think I will spare colleagues and preserve my own sanity. Thank you.
Now, with the noble exception of the lady who's just spoken, we have not been entirely successful at sticking to 5 minutes. So I'm afraid I must ask those remaining to keep to below 4 minutes so that we can try and get everybody in. Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair today, and I do congratulate the member for West Dorset in securing today's debate. We inherited the most dysfunctional water system you could imagine. The governance wasn't there, the accountability without the system, and of course Labour came in to put that right. And whilst we've gone so far on that journey, and I do congratulate the Minister, the legislation we've passed and the legislation to come, there clearly is so much to do. I look at my own city of York. We're based on two rivers. They flood. And of course, with all the pollutants in the water, it is a crisis when it occurs. What we found in 2023, 16,357 hours on the River Ouse and another 3,254 hours of sewage releases on the Foss. In fact, on the Foss, we now know that it has got the worst levels of pharmaceutical pollutants, which we haven't heard about in this debate, than any river in Europe. And as a result of that, I do draw the Minister's attention to the work that is being undertaken by the University of York in its EcoMix project, where it's looking at 1,000 different chemicals, whether from agriculture, pharmaceuticals, cleaning products, personal care products, and indeed things like tyre additives, in order to then raise the standards. We've got to know what's in our rivers to address those issues. And whilst we have gone so far with the excellent report by Sir John Cunliffe, there is clearly more to do. And I want to also draw the Minister's attention to the work of the University of York, again, such a leader in this field, of its Aqua project, which is drawing in citizens in the science project to detect those chemical and biological pollutants in order to put things right in the future. Having that mass community research not only enables the communities to own their rivers, but also to press for change. And they've been pressing me, therefore, to be in this debate today, and I am grateful to that. But we must, therefore, move forward. We had the reputation in this country of being the dirty man of Europe. And, of course, that changed, particularly under the last Labour government, and yet standards has slipped back so much over the last 14 years, and we are getting that reputation again. So it's really important that we maintain those standards, and therefore, whilst European legislation, the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, we should be adopting the very principles into our legislation here, ensuring that we close that gap on pollutants and move forward so our water can be safe again. Where we must also move forward, is to ban those dangerous forever chemicals which are finding its way into our waterways. There is too much flexibility on what chemicals people have been using, and therefore keeping our waterways safe is really important. But I do want to raise the issue about our infrastructure, modernising our sewage system, predominantly still based on the Victorian infrastructure of the past, not segregating rainwater from sewage. That is causing so much problem, but we need those investments to come on at pace. And finally, we need to ensure that we are measuring, reporting locally the scourge of what's happening in our waterways. Just finally, as already mentioned, Yorkshire Water has failed. Bills have gone up and accountability has gone down, and the Chief Exec taking eye-watering sums of funding as well. We need better governance, and we need to, on all of these failing contracts, move water into public ownership again.
Thank you. Dr. Ross Savage.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I thank the Honourable Member for West Dorset for bringing this very important debate, which I have to say feels like the nth debate that we have had on this issue. I'm getting a very strong sense of déjà vu, standing both here and in the House, speaking about water. And sadly, I suspect that I will stand here speaking on this subject many more times over the coming years. I know that the Minister is also passionate about this subject, and there are some aspects of the white paper that I do welcome, but I feel it just doesn't go far enough, and I will come on to specifics of that in just a moment. But right now, I just want to share a mental image. At this moment, there are at least 16 sewage outflows in my constituency of the South Cotswolds, spewing sewage into our rivers. Just picture that. And with the current stuck weather system and more rain expected, that is set to continue. I find that really distressing, and I'm sure that everybody here today does too. The central problem that we have here is that the water system now is built around profit. This privatised model has failed. This is a serious market failure, and it needs to be remedied. I'm not here to defend Margaret Thatcher's vision, very far from it. But her original vision was that we were going to go from being a nation of shopkeepers to a country of shareholders. But the somewhat foreseeable consequence of that was that people, individuals, private share owners would sell their shares. And so now we've ended up with big institutions owning our water companies and exploiting them as vehicles purely for profit. And the profit motive does not sit well with a vital public utility. So I'd like to point out 4 recurring failures in the government's approach on this issue and possibly on others as well. The lack of courage to truly grasp the nettle on failing systems. Overlooking nature-based solutions despite strong evidence that they work. Misunderstanding farming, as the Honourable Lady to my right has already referenced, ignoring the dual role that farmers play both as part of the problem and a very big part of the solution, and the failure to unleash people power. Nature-based solutions are still being treated as an afterthought, despite evidence that constructed wetlands can remove 60 to 90% of nitrates and phosphates. Nature can be a great ally in this, and there is no downside to using nature-based solutions. The approach on agriculture is piecemeal and inadequate. Agriculture accounts for about 40% of water pollution in English rivers, but the proposed action is seriously underpowered. So we need environmental land management funding to be better targeted at water outcomes and to include farmers to unleash what they know about their land. Thirdly, people power. In order to restore faith in the water industry, we need the transparency and accountability. We could unleash the power of citizen science to monitor water. Residents are the most motivated people to track water quality. But I finally want to come back to the fundamental issue of water company ownership. Liberal Democrats are calling for Thames Water to be converted into a public benefit company, or possibly for a mutual company owned by its customers. Changing ownership is the only way that we are going to be able to solve this problem for the long term. So I thank the government for where it has gone, but I beg you to go so much further. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And I thank the Honourable Member for West Dorset for giving us an opportunity to speak about water in this debate. My constituents in North West Leicestershire write to me about the water industry. They have done pretty consistently since I came to this place. Whether they're concerned about sewage, discharges, bonuses paid to water bosses, flooding or their bills. On all of these points, I feel, though my constituents' concerns, emails and conversations through casework surgeries and a specific roundtable have been heard and fed into this consultation. Our white paper, published as a response to the Independent Water Commission final report, will tackle some of these issues head-on, bringing forward strengthening and streamlining of regulation. I want to focus my speech today on the sewage discharges and flooding and the impact that has on my constituency. Leicestershire has again had significant rainfall and flood warning is still in place today on the north edge of my constituency. Coupled with that, sewage poured into our waterways in North West Leicestershire 15,000 hours. It's not just physically challenging for my constituents, but mentally challenging too. I've spoken about residents in Whitwick before, but I want to speak about another set of residents in Whitwick that had a flood just before Christmas. The desperation on people's faces when they have sewage water enter their properties is a really difficult thing for them to bear. We have to be doing better for them, and the water industry really does need to clean up its act. I've also visited Mary, who has a small holding in Donington-le-Heath. She got so frustrated by the outflow release on her small holding that she collected a bag of sewer debris on a recent release and popped it on the table at a meeting we had with Severn Trent Water. They were left with no doubt about her feelings that they consistently drop sewage on her land. It's such the frustration of local people. And in Sir John Cunliffe's report, he recommends a review into key legislation about urban wastewater treatment and to reduce pollutants and tackle sewage releases that have, for 15 long years have been potentially have been unaddressed by the previous government. My constituents will be reassured that our white paper will set out ambitions to tackle sewer misuse, prevent sewer blockages, help maximise sewer capacity and reduce pollution incidents and therefore sewage flooding. It's a core example of constituents raising concerns, a direct report to suggest solutions, and a government that is listening to them. On a separate note, it's encouraging to see water companies are finally investing in ageing infrastructure. However, constituents are often frustrated by their water bills going up and how the long-awaited improvements in Colville, which could address the issue in Donington-Heath, is still 4 years away. I would welcome the ministers to set out firmly in her response about how my constituents will be assured that they will see the improvements and the trust between consumers and the water companies that needs to be re-established off the back of the final report. Since elected, I've been engaging wherever and wherever possible with the efforts to strengthen the water sector, and I was proud to sit on the Water Special Measures Bill Committee. Building on our work here, I was pleased to see the Environment Secretary confirm that the Water White Paper will be followed by a transition plan and a water reform bill, and I look forward to the Minister's response on these. I'd also like to thank Sir John Cunliffe. I don't think anybody would actually be as passionate about the water sector as John Cunliffe. I think it's quite clear from the things he said and the way within he's taken this real problem for the UK and his passion, his vision for change, and it matches our government's ambition too. So I want to just take a moment to thank him for his work.
Thank you. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. And I congratulate the member for West Dorset on getting this debate. It's timely and very, very important. The Cunliffe report is seriously flawed. in that it left out the consideration of public ownership of the industry and of agriculture as well, which is a major pollutant, as other colleagues have pointed out this morning. Privatisation of water has been an absolute disaster from the very beginning, when many of us at that time warned against it. It has resulted in £72 billion being taken out of the industry in dividends and profits and fantastic levels of executive pay, and it's left behind pollution and flooding, and the costs of the pollution and the flooding and the foul water are borne by the public and borne by our constituents, who are increasingly angry about it. River quality is appalling by any standards right across the country, and indeed one of the worst river quality levels anywhere in Europe. And that is caused by the mixing of rainwater with sewage waste, and it is caused by agricultural runoffs that have a devastating effect. And the River Wye is just one example of how awful the rivers can become because of this agricultural waste runoff. And colleagues that drew attention to that are absolutely right. Excuse me. The waste of water by leaks is a huge problem. And I think I'm right in saying that the totality of the leaks across the whole country would fill the whole of Loch Ness every year. So instead of calling for new reservoirs to be built, shouldn't we be looking instead at much better water management, much better levels of rainwater retention, and much better levels of water distribution across the country? Because essentially in England, the biggest water consumers are in London and the South East, which is, broadly speaking, the driest part of the country. The wettest part of the country is the Midlands and the North West, where clearly moving water from one to the other makes a lot of sense. Can't we have some sense surrounding the organisation that we do on water distribution? Yes, of course.
Thank you, gentleman, for giving way. Does he recognise that under the previous government, the light touch regulation left our infrastructure crumbling? And it is right that under the new proposals that there is going to be asset mapping, so that finally we can actually know what the state of the infrastructure is and whether these investments are actually fixing the leaks.
Absolutely. The state of the infrastructure does need to be examined, and as one, like many others, who represents our constituents who have endless complaints. Thames Water are the most frequent visitors to my constituency. They dig up the roads frequently. They're much better at traffic management than Transport for London, actually, with the road closures that they bring because of it. And it is absurd, the levels of road closures that come because of it. So what I would also ask is that we look much more seriously at river basin management. I remember visiting York with the member for York during the flooding at that time, and we had a very long discussion with the Environment Agency about planning for flooding. And that would be involving restoration of peatlands, upland planting, reintroduction of beavers and others into rivers. Small scale, lots of rivers, lots of streams has an effect, and restoring floodplains. That sort of thing seems to me to be some of the most important things we can do. And so my view is that water should be taken back into public ownership, not old-style public ownership with a board of governors or board of directors appointed by the government, but instead a popular form of public ownership which would involve the brilliant workforce in all those companies with their knowledge, and directors coming from them, coming from local communities, local businesses, local authorities and unions, so we have a locally and popular-based water industry in our society. We could do it. Why don't we try that?
Thank you. I will call the honourable gentleman. The bad news is I can only give him 3 minutes, I'm afraid. Charlie Maynard.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and thank you to the member, my honourable friend, the member for West Dorset. I'm going to move very quickly through. I'd like to thank Sir John. I'd like to thank all the campaigners in my constituency. I note that Blake Primary School on Friday had to close because of sewage. That was the 4th time in the last 2.5 months that's had to happen. I note that the bills have gone up. We're paying 9.75% interest on Thames Water. And I'd like to thank sewagemap.co.uk, Alex Lipp and Johnny Dorr for putting together that fantastic website that tracks what's going on where. I'm going to go to one thing, which is about the ultimate controller. So today, this is about the ultimate controller definition, which is mentioned 16 times in the Water Commission report. I welcome the proposal in para 700 of that report, which would allow an enforceable undertaking to be put against ultimate controllers. But this only works if Ofwat is doing its job properly and recognising companies as ultimate controllers. As the Minister knows, the equity of Thames Water is now zero, with most of the investors having been written down their equity investment in full, and some have taken their board representation nearly 2 years ago. That leaves the debt holders. The Class A creditors hold the majority of the company's debt, who have now set up a consortium, London and Valley Water, to coordinate their interests. The water sector is a regulated sector, with the ultimate controller designation being critical. To meet this definition, an entity only has to materially influence the policy or affairs of Thames Water, and I quote that. There is no limit on how many entities meet this criterion, or whether they are equity or debt holders. Clearly, the consortium more than meets this definition, as they are effectively the only significant party left standing across either Thames Water's equity or debt structure. As per the regulation, Thames Water must inform Ofwat even of potential changes in its ultimate controllers. And Ofwat then requires water companies to obtain legally enforceable undertakings from each of their ultimate controllers. This has not happened in the case of the Class A creditors, and I believe it is a rig-up between the Treasury, DEFRA, Ofwat, Thames Water and the Class A creditors, and this is not good enough. It's in contravention of our regulations, and I have repeatedly asked ministers to explain in the Chamber, in the Business and Trade Select Committee, in this hall and in the press why they believe the Class A consortium does not meet the ultimate controller test, and I have received no answer. Most recently from the Minister 3 weeks ago, she just refused point blank to give me an answer in the Chamber. Or obfuscation. So please will the Minister now answer the question, does she consider the London and Valley Consortium to meet the ultimate controller test with regard to their material influence over Thames Water, and if not, why not?
Thank you. I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman and to all backbench colleagues for their cooperation. We come now to frontbench speeches, beginning with the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Tim Farron.
So, Jeremy, it's a pleasure to serve under your guidance this morning. I want to say thank you to everybody who's taken part in this debate so far. It's been really interesting and thoughtful, but especially to my honourable friend, the member for West Dorset, for securing another but really important debate on this broad issue. As a party, we made this as our centrepiece of our campaign in the 2024 general election, so I think all of us on our benches feel that we're here with a mandate to fight for change, and it's a joy and a pleasure to work alongside others from all parties in trying to achieve that. It was indeed an honour to meet with and to present evidence to Sir John Cunliffe as he put together his report, and indeed to work with the Minister and others who I enjoyed spending time on the Water Bill Committee. I suspect the sequel is coming, and we're all looking forward to it. I think what we all agree with, and where I think the report, the Water Commission's final report identifies correctly, is that the system is very badly broken. And it's in terms of performance of water companies, of course, but also in terms of the basic deep injustice of a water industry which seems to be self-serving and not serving the community. You know, we've seen, for example, in 2024, there were 3.6 million hours worth of sewage dumping in our lakes, rivers and seas. Same time, Ofwat failed to enforce a single fine over a 4-year period. You've got water companies getting collective bonuses worth 20 million in the last 4 years of data, and yet they're not rewards for success because only 14% of our rivers are in healthy standard. Over 500,000 sewage spills into our waterways just last year. Bills are rising, and yet, as we've heard from others, in so many cases, so a massive chunk of those bills, 11% if you live in United Utilities area in the northwest of England, in my constituency, is going to pay off service debt. If you're in the Thames region, you're paying more than 30% of your bill just to service the debt. And we've also seen, whilst the government has taken action often to try to ban bonuses, you see the water companies shamelessly shimmy their way around it. We've already heard a couple of examples today already. Southern Water's chief executive saw his pay double to 1.4 million, largely through a 2-year long-term incentive plan. And we've also heard the outrageous story of the chief executive of Yorkshire Water, paid 1.3 million through the company's holding company. Breaking the ban in spirit, and surely in reality too, certainly in the eyes of our constituents. And in my communities of Westmoreland, water matters massively to us. We're home to Windermere, to Ullswater, Coniston, Grasmere, Rydal Water, but also to many rivers as well. And from the Ear to the Edam, from the Crake to the Kent, we're seeing what just last year alone, 5,000 sewage discharge incidents, 55,000 hours of raw sewage pumped into our rivers and lakes and our coastal areas. So the Water Commission has mostly been on the money, so to speak, when it's been assessing the problem. This is an industry that performs appallingly when it comes to the pollution of our waterways, and it behaves appallingly in response to its own failure. And we agree with much of what is in the report. We agree that a single regulator, which the Liberal Democrats have been calling for years, that you merge Ofwat, the regulatory part of the Environment Agency and others, and create a powerful regulator that the water companies will actually be afraid of and that the public respects. That is a thing that should happen. We would call it the Clean Water Authority. We hope that the government will be copying our homework further. But there are some failures and submissions we're deeply concerned about. The government fails to grasp that while stronger regulation is really, really important, ownership also is important. The failure of Thames Water that my honourable friend, the member for Witney especially champions, but many others as well, it is an outrage, their failure, but it's also a massive opportunity for the government to use special administration and move that country into a mutual form of ownership owned by its customers. And having done that, that could create a model for ownership, a new form of ownership for the whole of the water industries, to be able to leverage capital investment, but also make sure that environmental and social concerns, clean water is absolutely at the pinnacle of the purpose of those companies and not rapacious profiteering. It would provide the opportunity, of course, to Jeremy, for water campaigners, environmental groups to find their way onto those boards. In my own community, the Save Windermere campaign, the Clean the River Kent campaign, the Eden and South Lakes Rivers Trust, but of course, citizens, scientists and volunteers right across all of our constituencies having a part to play in those new mutually owned water companies. That would make a difference. The government has made no attempt, either in the white paper or through the report, to look at the problem with volume. All of us are concerned about, we often talk about the number of hours of discharge into our lakes, rivers and seas, and that's an important measurement, Sir Jeremy, but the reason we mention that and not volume is because we're not allowed to know the volume. And we believe passionately in the Liberal Democrats that volume should be measured as well, and the water companies don't want it, and that's a reason for us to make sure that we force that. Bathing waters, the government should have a mandate to end the sewage dumping in bathing sites by 2030, and that we should be testing throughout the year and more regularly, not just these often very inaccurate snapshots. And on bonuses, we call for the law to be strengthened further, so that water company bosses cannot carry on dodging bonuses via the back door. So the water company's final report does identify rightly many of the problems that our constituents believe are so serious and need to be addressed. But while it contains many worthwhile proposals, a united regulator, for example, it does not face up to the desperate and obvious need for a transformation of the ownership model, for deeper and stronger regulations, and for a bonus ban that actually bans bonuses. So Jeremy, when Water UK, the industry body that represents the water companies, comes out, as it did, to endorse the government's approach to water reform, then that is all the proof you need that this government's approach continues to be, I'm afraid to say it, a bit wet. We need a plan for a radical transformation of the water industry, but so far, I'm sad to say, this isn't it.
To the honourable gentleman, I call the Shadow Minister, Blake Stevenson.
Thank you. On this, my first outing on behalf of His Majesty's official opposition, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Sir Jeremy. Can I first congratulate the member for West Dorset for securing this very important debate and join members who have welcomed the work of Sir John Cunliffe, thanked local action groups across England who are campaigning hard and cleaning up our waterways, but also the employees in our water industry working hard day in, day out to make a difference within the framework that they're operating within. And I took note of the rivers that were mentioned during the course of the debate today. So the River Lim in West Dorset, plus 2 chalk streams that I missed, I'm afraid. The River Wharfe and the River Aire in Shipley. The River Wye in North Herefordshire. River Ouse, River Foss in York. I think we're all agreed that they all need to be cleaned up. Ensuring that we have a plentiful supply of clean water and cleaner waterways across England matters to us all, including my constituents in Mid-Bedfordshire. Like many places across England, Mid-Bedfordshire is having to adapt to a growing population, drier summers and increasingly wet winters, all with ageing infrastructure. Having grown up spending many an hour playing in my local river, a tributary of the River Test in Hampshire, I enjoyed a childhood that many simply cannot enjoy today, with the latest assessment showing that no rivers in England are in good or high overall health. Nature is also in grave danger. Freshwater habitats cover less than 1% of the Earth's surface, but support more than 10% of the global species. And since the 1970s, freshwater species have declined by 85%, far outpacing declines in terrestrial and marine systems. England's globally significant chalk streams, which make up 85% of the world's total, are among the habitats most affected by pollution and abstraction. And I was pleased today to hear many passionate advocates for our chalk streams. But what did this government do when members on this side of the House put down amendments to the Planning and Infrastructure Bill to restore and protect these habitats? They were ignored, pitting care for our environment and countryside as blockers against so-called progressive builders, all illustrating in the first 18 months in government a level of arrogance that will do absolutely nothing to secure our futures and clean up our waterways. The problems with the water sector have been known for a long time and well reported. The Environmental Audit Committee's Water Quality and Rivers report dating back to January 2022, for example, provides a clear picture of the concerns. And the previous government went on to help to identify the scale of the problem. When Labour left power in 2010, only 7% of storm overflows were being monitored. By 2023, 100% were being monitored, and it unveiled the severity of the situation facing the water industry. With water company storm overflows spilling into England's rivers, lakes and seas for a record 3.61 million hours in 2024. And I take the Right Honourable Gentleman's point about us needing to understand the volume, not just the hours that there is spilling. So there is much more to do. The last government's plan for water introduced the Water Restoration Fund, which channelled environmental fines and penalties into projects that improved the water environment. And ministers in the last government took action to ban water company bosses' bonuses for illegal action. So John Cunliffe's independent review was a serious undertaking, running to 460 pages and 88 recommendations, much of which His Majesty's official opposition has cautiously welcomed. For example, we know that, as it stands, the regulators are not working as they should be, and that creating a single joined-up regulator is a sensible recommendation. I'm concerned, however, at both the speed at which the government is moving and some of the proposals in the government's white paper, which may see bills rise for families. On the white paper, can the Minister confirm how many of Sir John's 88 recommendations were accepted by the government and included in the water white paper? And on water bills, first, what assessment has the Minister made on how smart metering may impact the average family's water bills? Second, after the benefits of water metering, what additional hit to disposable income does the Minister expect increasing bills will have on families, coming as it will on the back of record tax rises by this government? And third, can the Minister tell us how much taxpayer and bill payer money has been allocated to their white paper, and over what time frame these taxes and bills will be used to pay for the work in the white paper? To reduce the root causes of pollution, the government has also announced that it intends to implement pre-pipe solutions, which have been discussed today in this debate, but has not yet provided any examples of how this will be implemented. Can the Minister provide further details on the implementation, and particularly how it will be integrated into the planning system? The Minister will know that since being elected, I've been calling for Schedule 7 of the Water Management Act to be enacted, first in my adjournment debate on flooding in Bedfordshire, and also through the Environmental Audit Committee. It was a recent recommendation. The Minister at first seemed sympathetic to the arguments, but now seems to consider that there are other ways to achieve the same outcome. Could she highlight what those other ways are? Our infrastructure is ageing and needs investment. That is abundantly clear to communities in the South East now suffering repeated and unacceptable supply disruptions. How will the Minister make sure the infrastructure is upgraded to ensure these catastrophic failures, such as those seen under South East Water in the last 2 months, do not happen again? A glaring gap in the government's rhetoric on water is conserving and ensuring water security. That means improving supply. How and when will the government improve water security? It's important that in the efforts to reform the water sector, that all stakeholders are engaged in the process. This includes farmers, and I was pleased to see pleased to hear members today talk about the importance of engaging with farmers, who early last year had the rug pulled from under their feet when the government suddenly halted applications to the Sustainable Farming Incentive Scheme. The SFI scheme rewarded farmers for adapting land management practices which reduced pollution, managed water flow and improved water quality. We're almost a year on from the closure of the SFI, and the government, despite promising details on a new scheme last summer, only announced in January this year that a new scheme will open in June. Does the Minister not appreciate that farming is an occupation which requires long-term planning and certainty, particularly when so many other aspects such as the weather are left to chance? In another potential blow to farmers, the government has confirmed that it is considering whether environmental permitting should be extended to cattle farming, when this was not included as a direct recommendation in the independent review. As NFU Vice President Rachel Hallos said, and I quote, "Such a change would have a direct impact on farm business growth." When the beef sector is already struggling with increasing costs and higher taxes imposed on them by this Chancellor, how does the Minister intend to ensure that the sector is not facing the possibility of another new cost pressure? Is she engaging with the sector to listen to their concerns? To conclude, Sir Jeremy, water quality and security is an issue which I know many of my constituents care deeply about. They're quite simply fed up that their water bills are increasing while water companies are failing to clear up their waterways. Given the government's habit of missing their own deadlines in the first 18 months of this Parliament, will the Minister give an ironclad commitment that the transition plan will be published in parliamentary time this year, and can she clarify how long the transition will take? As the Minister knows, and may well repeat to me, people voted for change. People expect change, especially in our water sector, and they demand that this government moves faster. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for West Dorset for bringing forward this debate, and indeed everybody who has spoken in it. And I welcome the opposition's spokesman to his place, and I've enjoyed listening to his first contribution from the dispatch box. Before we get into the debate on water, I do want to just say a few words about flooding, because obviously there is still a major incident classification in Somerset. And following this debate, I am going to Somerset. And this remains sort of a concern. There are reports of flooding to around 300 properties, mostly in Somerset, Dorset, Devon and Cornwall. The Environment Agency flood defences have helped to protect around 16,200 properties from flooding, but this is still a difficult situation. There's heavy rain still across England, which has continued in the south and southwest. And I'd like to put on record my thanks to the Environment Agency, the emergency services, and to everybody, and my absolute sympathy and support for anybody impacted by flooding. And just as a trade unionist, I want to also sort of repeat from the comments made from my honourable friend, the member for Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme, that when we're talking about flooding and when we're talking about water companies and we're talking about the anger that the public feel, that must never be directed at the people working for these companies out there, often the ones fixing the broken pipes, dealing with the sewer overflow. And I remain concerned with reports from the unions about how they've been treated by some. So I hope that as much as our anger might be directed at the industry, it should never be directed at the people working for that industry. So I'm delighted to say that we've set out our vision for water through the white paper, which was published last month. It outlines how we'll work together with water companies, communities, environment and everybody to transform our water sector, ensuring a sustainable water system for future generations, driving forward the transformatory change that we need. And just to reply to my honourable friend, the member for Shipley, and I pay tribute to her passion on this topic, because not only does she publicly lobby me, Sir Jeremy, but I think every tea room, coffee and corridor as well. So she is genuinely committed to this, and I thank her for her work. And she's right as well to mention the £4 million of bonuses that we have banned, and the report that the Public Audit Committee have done, and the way it's highlighted regulatory failure. There is mention in the white paper around sustainable debt and sort of what that might be. And as mentioned, the regulator is bringing forward economic environment together, and she's right to highlight the need for skills and looking at how we can appoint the people to create the... Because she's quite right, while statutorily those organisations still need to continue and do their job and hold companies to account, it's how do we create the shadow organisation working at the same time, because until you actually change the law, they still have all of the powers. And the Honourable Lady from North Herefordshire, I'm looking forward to meeting her tomorrow to talk in detail about the River Wye, and I will come on to talk a little bit more about the environment. I'm on to a friend, the member for Cannock Chase, thank him for his work on the EFRA committee. And he's quite right, we need to have more of a joined-up approach, and asset health is a massive, massive issue, as only too well the people in Tunbridge Wells have found out. And companies, I mean, fundamentally, I was shocked when I came into this, and it's telling me that companies don't even know where some of their assets are. I mean, that's just an absolute basic. And in response to my honourable friend, the member for Islington North and Cannock Chase, on environmental pollution, which is a huge issue. So DEFRA has an Addressing Pollution from Agriculture programme, and I met with them on the 27th of January, and this group I've sort of mentioned in here before, so there's all of the farming representatives in there, as well as many of the environmental groups, and representatives from the water company, and my idea was to bring everybody together so everybody could hear from each other, so the environmentalists could hear from the farmers, could hear from the water companies about how are we going to address this challenge of environmental pollution, because many farmers, I think there's a question around education and understanding the right way to do things. I don't think they meaningfully go out there and cause pollution, but it's how do we sort of work that. So I've met with them on the 27th of January, along with the Farming Minister. We met side by side with them to talk to them about this issue. And they're going to be meeting every 4 weeks until summer to sort of get together and say, what can we do about agriculture pollution as one of the main causes of pollution. And I think that collaborative way of sort of, rather than, you know, I talk to the environmentalist and the farming minister talks to the farmers, actually everyone together, let's talk about this, this is a problem, what can we do about it? And that's the approach we've taken. And of course, when there's more to say of the outcomes of this group, then I will report back to the House. My honourable friend, the member for York Central, I know again is passionate about this issue. And in fact, my very first visit as minister was to go and see her river barrier, then the river fast we went to go and see. And I'm so pleased that she's mentioning the issues around chemicals and this increasing sort of awareness that we have of PFAS and what's happening with chemicals and the need to sort of look at some of the thresholds for levels of chemicals in the water. So I will definitely go and ask the University of York to send me information on their eco mix work and their aqua project as well to sort of see how they're doing it. And my honourable friend, the member for North East Leicestershire, she brings to life the horrific experience that people have faced with flooding and how completely devastating it is for people's mental health as well. And we do need to be looking at what can be improved. And obviously, if there's any concerns around water companies not giving her the information on what's going to be improved in her area and where, then I'm more than willing to sort of follow up on some of that. One of the other things that came through is people who know me know I get very excited about regional planning, and this is the place, I think, to be excited about regional planning. So there isn't, in the white paper itself, it talks a little bit about what we're going to do, but I'll give you a heads up on what's happening tomorrow with me, and that's the first meeting of the steering group looking at regional planning is happening tomorrow. And so what we want to do with this group is bring together, and we've got people on there, got catchment partnerships, Environment Agency, local authorities, Ofwat, national highways, because of course one of the concerns with water pollution is actually runoff from our highways. NFU, Wildlife and Countryside Link, water companies, River Trust, Blueprint for Water, internal drainage boards, I've probably missed somebody. But we're bringing everybody together to say, where are we going to have the early rollout of some of these around the country? So where we're looking at sort of this model that Sir John Cunliffe talks around, and this regional planning model, how does that apply to different catchments that are more coastal or that it's more river, you know, like how does that apply to different areas? How will it work in practice? And I think, I can't remember who it was saying that we don't seem to be in favour of nature-based solutions. Well, clearly they've never heard me talk about my passion for nature-based solutions, because that's simply not true. And the idea is that the pre-pipe stuff, the nature-based solutions, we're looking at it in that regional area. And again, different areas around the country, there are going to be slightly different compositions of who will be on those boards, depending on the type of catchment that it is. But I'll be able to tell more about... Yeah, of course.
I thank the Minister for giving way. Could she please assure us in the House that the regional planning and water catchments will have a strong citizen voice embedded within them, as well as drawing on evidence and expertise?
I mean, we're yet to sort of work out, as I say, depending on the catchment will depend on the composition, but I understand, I think in the white paper we've referred to it as community voices, you know, how are those going to be represented? With respect to the Honourable Lady, I don't believe that she was in this debate at the start.
Yeah, I'm grateful to the Minister, and it is, of course, up to the Minister to give way to whoever she wishes to, but she's perfectly right. The Honourable Member was not here for the vast majority of this debate, and it isn't courteous, I'm afraid, to this House or to this Chamber or to those who've participated in the entirety of the debate for the Honourable Lady to seek to intervene at this late stage. Minister.
Thank you. So I want to now turn to regulation and the case for establishing a new single water regulator. But as mentioned, this has to go alongside of continuing what we have at the moment. And fundamental reform of water regulation is required. So it's bringing together the economic, the environmental planning, looking at a singular accountable improvement body and enable a whole firm view of water company performance. We are looking to, I think the honourable gentleman, the spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats, what did you call it, phase 2, round 2? I'm not quite sure what the right phrase is, but we'll be back with further legislation. And I think this is what we absolutely need. So looking at a chief engineer being embedded in the new regulator, ensuring companies focus on fixing crumbling pipes, treatment works, engineering expertise. It's shocking that we haven't had engineering expertise. Looking at greater stability, transparency, protection for in customers. Until then, of course, existing regulators must retain their full legal powers and responsibility. However, this government is determined that the future regulator does not inherit the problems of the past. Leadership appointments for the new regulator, including a chair designate, will therefore be made at the earliest opportunity, and they will drive the design and direction of this new regulator to support a smooth transition. And before that point, early steps are being taken right now to look at joining up regulatory activity, particularly between Ofwat and the Environment Agency, until that new regulator is established.
Thank you. We've got 4 minutes to go, perhaps, including a wind-up. I'm wondering whether the Minister is going to get to my point or not.
I will, but I would like to say, and I would like this to be, I'd hope this would be felt by all members across the House, that I am extremely accessible as a minister, always willing to meet with people. So I don't like having my integrity questioned. The honourable gentleman should know I responded to a letter from him on this very issue on the 12th of January. If he hasn't received it, then please, he's very welcome to come and see me, but to imply that I have ignored his requests, I think, is false.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, where was I? We look at putting customers first. We want to end the steep, huge hikes that we've seen in bills, make sure that that never happens again. We've introduced our customer panels, and we've just seen the first of those happening in South West Water, which has been run by the CCW, to look at listening to those customer voices and making sure that they are at the heart of water companies. We need to do more on this. The Water Ombudsman will help to restore the balance, but fundamentally, we want customers to feel that they are listened to, they're at the heart of this, they're important. And then I think having the customer panels and strengthening the Ombudsman, making the processes around what customers feel their experience is so much better. And of course, thinking about bills, we're about to respond imminently on our consultation on water shore. So how do we make water more affordable for people with disabilities, for people with large families, for people who have a health need and therefore need to use more water, as well as doubling the support of social tariff and holding companies to the commitment to end water poverty by 2030. Water meters were mentioned, and actually for a huge number of people, water meters can help people save money, and I encourage everybody to talk to their constituents about this, because it's something, when I speak to people, I remember speaking to an elderly lady who was on her own, telling me that she was really worried her bill would go up with a water meter, and I said, well, how many bedrooms do you have in your house? She says, well, it's 3, you know, it's family home, kids have moved out, and I was like, it will be less if you get yourself a water meter. And the great thing about water meters as well is not only can you save money, but it's also, it helps you think about your water use and can support the the environment. There is also a section in the white paper called water security, so it is an important issue for us. And that is looking at making sure that we're dealing with the growing demands being placed on our system at the moment. How much water do we need for all of our homes that we want to build, businesses and growth? How much water do we have? How do we address the gap? And I think the exciting things around thinking about sustainable urban drainage, thinking about water use, thinking about building regulations, thinking about how are we using grey water harvesting, all of these things must inform part of our thinking. And in fact, tomorrow, I think I'm talking to the Lords Committee on drought, and one of the things on drought is around water management. I'm getting this right. So, to conclude, this government is committed to delivering lasting change, restoring confidence and ensuring resilient, sustainable water systems that work for customers, the environment and future generations.
Grateful to the Minister. With less than a minute, Edward Morella.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy, and again, my thanks to you for your excellent chairing of this debate. I want to thank all of the honourable members who have spoken today, and there's too many to name in the time that we've got, but it is clear that everybody is echoing the same thoughts. The public anger at the dividends and the bonuses, the anger at the lack of investment, the anger at the high water bills. Everybody has raised the ownership structure that needs reform and additional support for farmers. I want to thank the Minister for her response and for going straight from here to my honourable friend's constituency in Somerset. I'd like to extend again an offer for her to visit West Dorset at her earliest convenience.
I thank the honourable gentleman again and all those who've participated in this debate. The question, therefore, is that this House has considered the Independent Water Commission final report. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.